Hello and welcome. I'm James Murphy. Today we're going to be talking about how to make built-in operators like max work with your classes. So I have a class here, ints and sum, actually from a previous video where we were trying to find what's the maximum sum of an increasing subsequence of a list of integers. And in order to solve this problem, we made this ints and sum class. Essentially, all it does is keep track of a list of integers, but also it keeps track of their sum. In that previous video, there was a step in the algorithm where we needed to compute the maximum of a few of these elements, where we say that one is bigger than the other if the sum is bigger than the other, because in that problem, we were just trying to find something with the biggest sum, so it made sense to say that something of this form was the biggest if it had the maximum sum. And in order to do that, we defined this static method max, which takes in any number of these ints and sum classes, instances of that class rather, and it's able to tell you what the maximum is. So you can see if I run this code, we have three ints and sums here, and you can see the first one has sum 8, second sum 9, and the third sum 1. So the biggest one should be this one with sum 9. And indeed, if we call this ints and sum max and pass in our list of them, then it is able to pick out this one with sum 9, which is the biggest. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with this code. However, after looking at it for a little bit, I realized that it's somewhat unPythonic. And what I mean by that is that the Python language provides a way for you to make max work with your own classes. So the fact that I defined ints and sum.max is kind of an anti-pattern. Why isn't my class just using the built-in max? So we're going to see how to make this class use the built-in max. And by extension, you'll be able to see how to use a bunch of different built-in operators with your own classes. Now, of course, you can just look up how to make it work, but what I'm actually going to do is just try to use it and then see what goes wrong, because in this case, Python actually tells me exactly what to do. When I run the code, Python is telling me that greater than is not supported between two instances of ints and sum. Well, there's the answer. All I need to do is define a greater than method. So if you're not familiar, you can define a greater than method for your class using this function. So you just use 2 underscores, then gt, then 2 underscores. These functions that start with 2 underscores and then something and then 2 underscores are commonly called dunder methods or magic methods. And they're called that because you define this and then some other built-in Python thing starts working. So in this case, I want to define that self is bigger than other just based off of their sum. So I want to say if self dot sum is bigger than other dot sum, then I'll just return that. So self will be bigger than other if self.sum is bigger than other.sum. And if I do that, then magically you can see that the built-in max operator just works. So if I had been thinking, this is probably what I should have done rather than defining my own specific max function. So for the purposes of this video, this max method is not needed at all. So let's just go ahead and comment that out and mark it as not needed, defined greater than instead. Use built-in max. And so here we no longer need to do that. And of course, when we run it, we do have that, of course, we are using the built-in max. Now, we could have also used the less than operator. So if I just define this as LT for less than and change this to less than, I can even comment out the greater than here and run it again, and you can see that it still works. Now, I actually tried this with less than or equal to and greater than or equal to, and those don't work. So it turns out it only works with greater than or less than if you're interested in max. We just saw how to make the built-in max operator work with one of our own classes, but what if we were interested in making a different operator work? Generally, all you have to do is define a different one of the dunder methods or magic methods. So let's go ahead and print out what the dir of an instance of this class looks like, and that will help to see what these dunder methods that are available to define actually are. So running the code, you can see that what dir has done is, well, dir gives me back a list of all of the attributes of the class, and then I've just joined them by new lines so they print out nicely. So you can see the first things that are printed out are a whole bunch of these dunder methods. Depending on what built-in functionality you want to work with your class, you just need to define the appropriate dunder method. So if I wanted stir of my class to do something special, then I would just define the dunder stir method. Or if I wanted to define a repr, I could do that to make it work with the built-in repr. And of course, we saw greater than and less than. If you wanted to make it work with sum, then you might define a dunder add method. So you can see that dunder add isn't in this list here. Of course, you can look up online what all of the possible dunder methods are, but if you want to gain some kind of functionality that's similar to something built in, I would recommend just seeing what happens when you run dir on that thing instead. So what's something built in that has an add operation? Well, let's just try 0. And you can see here, when we run it with 0, there's a whole bunch of mathematical operations, absolute value, add, and, bool, things like that. So you can see in this case, if we wanted to make plus work, we could just define a dunder add method, and then that would allow us to use both the built-in plus symbol as well as something like sum. So there you have it. That's how to make Python built-ins work with your classes. Don't forget, if you like the video, give it a like, give it a comment, and if you especially like it, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks.